Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Translate Light Novels. It is indeed episode 23, the first of the year 2023. Ah, how fitting. Anyway, by now you know the drill. This is part 23 in a series. If you don't know the drill, go watch part 1. Check the video description for any other information, and let's get started. Just a quick note, this episode and the 3 episodes that come after it in this series, little tiny content warning for just some violence and war imagery. It's not very graphic. The last episode there's a little more, but yeah, just a little warning. The Japanese narration. けたたましい叫び声に飛び起き、窓の外を見たアユルの血は一瞬にして凍りついた。Ketatamashi means like shrill or noisy. Sakebigoe is a screaming voice or screaming voices, literally. If you look at sakebu is to scream, koe is voice. Tobioki. So this is the stem version of tobiokiru. Okiru is just to get up or wake up out of bed. And then tobiokiru or tobioki would be like to jump out of bed or to jolt awake. It's not necessarily to get out of bed. Okiru is one of those ambiguous verbs. You don't know if it actually means waking up or getting up. I would say jolted awake or bolted awake. Mado no soto o mita, so looked outside the window. Ayuru, so ayuru is coming after all of these descriptive words. So ayuru, who jumped awake at the sound of the shrill voices and looked out the window. No chi wa, so his blood, the blood of Ayuru, who jumped awake and looked out the window at the sound of the shrill screaming voices. Isshin ni shite, in an instant or instantaneously. Koritsuita, it froze. So his blood froze instantly or instantaneously when he looked out the window from hearing the shrill screaming voices. As you can see, there are many different ways you could rearrange this into one sentence or even into 2 sentences. Let's see what patron A did. The sound of a piercing cry instantly froze Ayuru's blood. He jumped out of bed and ran to the window to look. Yeah, so this is a bit nitpicky, but the sound of a piercing cry, it's stronger to just say a piercing cry instantly froze Ayuru's blood. I don't know, the sound of a piercing cry is also fine. I'm just being, this is just my opinion, I guess. He jumped, and patron A, as you can see, put this into 2 sentences, which I like. I think it works a lot better that way. He jumped out of bed and ran to the window to look. Yeah, it's more like if you look at the original Japanese, it's the sound, it's the piercing cry that woke him, that jolted him awake. And then when he looked out the window, that's what froze his blood. So the order of operations is a bit mixed up here. Could use a little reworking, but I like that it was put into 2 sentences because otherwise it is a very long sentence. Patron B said, Ayuru bolted awake to a piercing scream, period. When he looked out the window, his blood ran cold. Yeah, this is more like the order of operations. He bolted awake from the piercing scream, and then when he looked out the window, that was when his blood ran cold instead of froze. Both of those are fine. Yeah, note how like patron B's, the way they're sort of bluntly worded, I think works very well. I know I mentioned it earlier in different videos in this series, but when you are writing prose, it can be helpful if you're writing like action scenes to write things like more concisely and just shorter sentences, less description, I suppose, in some ways. If you want like the reader to feel like they're experiencing it the same way Ayuru is, it's like, boom, I'm awake. Boom, there's screams. My blood freezes. Instead of, it was a cold winter's night when Ayuru, you know, it has more emotional impact this way. And then small Sarah, Ayuru was jolted awake by the sound of screaming voices. As he looked out the window, his blood seemed to freeze instantly. So note the difference here. Like patron B and small Sarah basically took the same approach. Sentence A, we're talking about he was jolted awake by screaming voices, and then the second sentence is when he looked out the window, his blood froze. But note how small Sarah's was just unnecessarily wordy. Ayuru was jolted awake by passive voice, right? Instead of the scream jolting him awake, it was Ayuru was jolted awake by the sound of screaming voices versus Ayuru bolted awake to a piercing scream. That patron B's one is like, because it's shorter, there aren't as many extraneous words. I think it just hits a lot harder than small Sarah's, even though they're essentially saying the same thing. And then the second sentence, as he looked out the window, his blood seemed to freeze instantly, even though there was no seemed to in the Japanese. Small Sarah added it, which is dumb. Like, let it be a metaphor. His blood froze. It's okay if blood doesn't technically freeze, like his blood froze. And as he looked out the window, it's like, I don't know, that sounds a little too casual. When he looked out the window, his blood ran cold. Like that just, I think it gets to the point faster and it, has more emotional impact as a result. Okay, next, couple sentences of Japanese narration. I'm keeping all of these together. Base, is that base? Let me look that up and make sure. Ruby text, yep, base. Okay, cool. Base to tomo ni ken wo furikazasu heishi tachi. Period. Gunma or Goomba? Ruby text to the rescue. Goomba. Okay. Goomba no inanaki goe, nigemadou shumin tachi no hime, achikochi de hi no te ga agatteiru. Period. So note how this almost reads like a poem. It's 3 very short descriptive sentences. This thing is happening. This thing is happening. This thing is happening. It's like kind of like a list of things, but in a semi-poetic way. And there's words in here that we don't necessarily use in conversational Japanese. So base, it's the sound, like if you look at the kanji. So this kanji that it looks like horse, but it has another radical on top of it. It means to insult or to scold. So like the insulting or like the scolding voices. Totomo ni, so along with the scolding voices, ken wo furikazasu heishitachi. Heishitachi is soldiers. Furikazasu or ken wo furikazasu is to wield or swing a sword, to brandish it menacingly sometimes. Just like, aha, I'm raising it on high and I'm about to kill somebody, basically. So along with the sound of screaming insults, or the soldiers screamed insults as they wielded or as they brandished their swords. Gunba no inanaki koe, so the neighing voices of the war horses. Like if you look at those kanji, gun is like army or whatever, and then ba is horse, so like the war horses basically. Nigemadou, shumin tachi no hime. So hime is screams, so the screams of the citizens who were trying to run away. So like nigeru on its own is just to run away or to escape. But madou is sort of like to do so like frantically and lost and like scrambling sort of. So like you're kind of scrambling to run away in many directions. Like not all of them, in fact, hardly any of them are getting away. We'll find out. Third sentence, achikochi de, here and there and everywhere. Hinote ga, flames, ga agatteiru, flames were rising, basically. So we're painting a beautiful poetic picture of war and destruction. Patron A, the sounds of brandished swords and shouts from soldiers, comma, the neighing of war horses, comma, the screams of escaping villagers, they all blended together into one horrific cacophony. Buildings were set ablaze everywhere. So Patron A took some liberties. It's pretty though, like, and it's capturing the spirit of what this was in the Japanese. It was being poetic. So I kind of like that addition, they all blended together into one horrific cacophony. That was not in the original Japanese. That was just completely added in. But, it makes it more like a complete thought. And I like that the periods were changed to commas. I think that works pretty well as well. Like in Japanese, it kind of works to have them be complete sentences in a poetic way, but in English it doesn't necessarily read as well. Buildings were set ablaze everywhere. Again, the Japanese does not mention buildings, but I mean, obviously there were buildings. And like, otherwise why? Like, how would the flames really be rising? Like, what would they be burning down if not buildings and farms and other things? Maybe like dwellings instead of buildings would have been better, because buildings, to me, that just makes me think of like modern concrete buildings in a city, because I'm a modern person. It's not wrong though. Patron B, outside, soldiers slung their swords and insults. War horses' whinnies mixed with the shrieks of evacuating townsfolk. Tongues of flame rose amidst the pandemonium. Ooh, I like the pandemonium. Yeah, Patron B like, what Patron A expressed is they all blended together into one horrific cacophony. Patron B just said pandemonium. Just by adding that word, that brings it all together as well. Tongues of Flame is really interesting. I like it. I like the imagery there. Like, you can really see, like, when flames rise and they kind of curl like that, they do kind of look like a snake's tongue or something, like slithering out there. And notice how Patron A also chose to use sentences to separate the ideas. Outside, soldiers slung swords and insults. And this outside, I think, is just added to tie it together to the previous sentence. This is Ayuru looking outside and seeing all of this happening. I like combining, like, slung swords and insults. Like, they were swinging their swords and they were hurling insults. They were doing both of those things. And it's sort of painting the picture, like, in the Japanese it was doing this too. It was painting the picture that the insults and the swords were both attacks. They are. One is like a verbal attack, the other is a physical attack. Warhorse's whinnies. I like the alliteration there. I don't know if it was intentional, but I just like the warhorse's whinnies mixed with the shrieks of evacuating townsfolk, period. See, it can kind of work too in English to just do periods after these thoughts. But just note how different that is. Small Sarah, the swords of the knights clanged as one with the screaming voices. Oh, that's kind of cool. It's not quite right because it's not screaming voices so much as it's like insults that the soldiers are hurling. But I kind of liked the clanged as one though. That's interesting. The neighing of the battle horses, the screams of the villagers trying to escape, and here and there a fire was growing. So see how, like, if you don't bring these thoughts together like Patron A did, Patron A used commas as well. Like, the neighing of the war horses, the screams of the escaping villagers, M dash, they all blended together into one horrific cacophony, versus Small Sarah just did the neighing of the battle horses, comma, the screams of the villagers trying to escape, semicolon, and here and there, comma, a fire was growing. Like, what is tying all, I don't know, this is just like a list of things. It kind of needs a word or a little phrase at the end to kind of bring it all together, and that's missing, so it's a little lost, but it works a little bit. And I like the clanged as one with the screaming voices, even though that wasn't quite in the original Japanese. The next line, all right, we have some dialogue. Ningero! 3 dashes, small 2, exclamation point. Kutoh koko no kun ga! Small 2, exclamation point. So, ningero, we already went over nigeru is to escape, so like run away, run for your lives. Kutoh koku, that's Kutoh, the kingdom, the empire that kind of rules over them. No gun ga, so Kutoh's army is here. Like, ga would be followed up with some other words if it were a complete sentence. But it's not. So Kutoh's army is here, or Kutoh's army brought us some chocolate cake, or Kutoh's army is going the way of the dodo and they're not going to bother us anymore. It really could be anything, but I mean, based off of context, he's saying like they're here or they're killing us or whatever. Patron A, run for your lives! The Kutoh army's attacking! He heard a villager cry, so a dialogue tag was added here. And Ayuru is kind of put in here, so it's like Ayuru hears this villager crying this. I kind of like that clarity. Yeah, run for your lives is great for Ningero. And the Kutoh army is attacking. That's weird. The Kutoh army is attacking. I guess not. It just depends on how you emphasize it when you say it. By the way, I'm sorry if you're hearing a bunch of weird glonk, glonk, glonk noises as I'm filming this. Like, there's stairs right behind me and neighbors keep walking up and down them. So I don't know if you can hear that or not, but if you are, that's what that is. Anyway, Patron B, run! The Kutoh army is M dash. That works too. Like, ordinarily I would say, hey, don't cut off a sentence like that. It sounds awkward. Like, go ahead and finish it with a verb like we would in English. But it's actually fine to cut it off there because maybe that villager, like, dies right after he says that. I don't know, it's still maybe a little awkward. I would finish it. I would say the Kutoh army is here or something, or attacking. Small Sarah, run! Kutoh soldiers are here. Yeah, I like Kutoh soldiers are here. And run is fine. I prefer run for your lives, though. I think it sounds cooler. Yeah, next line. So we've got some narration. Is this socho? I know what it means. It means early morning, but how do you pronounce the dang thing? Socho, yes. 早朝の村を襲った苦闘の軍がまだ大方とこについていた無防備な 村人たちをまるで虫けらをひねりつぶすように虐殺していくよう様を、様を少年は唖然と見つめていた。So very, very, very long sentence. One would probably be wise to split it up into different sentences. So, 草場の村を襲ったクトー国の軍が So, Kutoh's soldiers, or Kutoh's army, who attacked the village like early in the morning, まだ大方床についていた So, 大方床についていた I've never even seen this 大方床 anywhere else in my travels. So basically, they were still in bed. 無防備な村人たち So the innocent villagers who were still in bed. まるで as if they were 虫けらをひねりつぶすように So as if they crushed them as if they were insects. 虐殺していくSo 虐殺する to massacre, to slaughter. And then this していく attachment to the verb means like they are continuing to do this verb. They are doing it and they are continuing to do it. So they're like continuing to slaughter as they go, basically. And this sama, in this case, it's like the vision of them doing this, basically. 少年は唖然と so with his jaw dropped or in a state of shock or bewilderment 見つめていた so he just stared in shock as the soldiers slaughtered the innocent villagers who were still in bed. So that's a lovely picture. Patron A, from the window. I don't know if we need to keep clarifying that he's watching from the window. Like, we already know he's watching from the window. Ayuru helplessly watched the Kutoh armies. The Kutoh armies. Yeah, I guess. I don't know why it sounds weird to me. It just does. The Kutoh army's early morning attack. They were slaughtering defenseless villagers, many of whom were still sleeping as if they were insects that needed to be crushed. This needed to be is interesting. That wasn't really in the original Japanese. Yeah, I guess because, like, you're using the two verbs here in Japanese, the slaughtering and the, hineri tsubusu, the crushing insect metaphor. So I guess you kind of have to add that needed to be. Insects to be crushed would have worked just fine, though. You didn't need needed. You don't not need it either. Needed is fine. Yay. Patron B. In the early morning light. I like that for Sochol. Kutoh soldiers slaughtered. Yeah, I think this is a lot cleaner. Instead of the Kutoh army, just Kutoh soldiers. I don't know, it's cleaner. The is just weird to me. Kutoh soldiers slaughtered the defenseless villagers where they stood. I think where they slept would be better, since it was in the Japanese, exterminating them one by one before they'd barely had a chance to leave their beds. Yeah, that works too. Yeah, you could have done like exterminating them one by one like insects, but by using the verb exterminating, you're already evoking that like insect imagery. So that's a good way of combining that. Ayuru could only stare in shock at the scene. I like that. I like that that is its own separate sentence. In Japanese, this was all one big sentence. It was like, he could only stare in shock as blah, 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 blah. So this is pretty clean. I like this wording and this like organization of everything. Yeah, so the verbs slaughtered and exterminate for like mushikera o hineri tsubusu and gyakusatsu. I think those work really well. And then small Sarah, the Kutoh soldiers had attacked early that morning so they would be able to slaughter the defenseless villagers like insects. The boy vacantly stared on. It's missing a little bit. Like, small Sarah just kind of cut some stuff out. Maybe she didn't feel like looking up all those difficult words, like o kata toko ni tsuite ita. But yeah, they attacked early in the morning so that they would be able to slaughter the defenseless. That is true. That is why they attacked early in the morning. I don't know. It sounds weird that it's worded that way in this translation. The boy vacantly stared on. The boy, his name is Ayuru. Stop calling him the boy. It's just weird. Okay, next line. We have more dialogue. Ayuru! 窓辺に立ち尽くす息子の手を母が強く引いた。逃げるのよ。Alright. So, Ayuru, small tsu exclamation point. So, Ayuru. And, oh yeah, I didn't mention this the last time the small tsu came up, but just to remind everybody, a small tsu at the end of something means that there's like a glottal stop at the end of it, or it's like, it's an abrupt stop in the vowel. So instead of Ayuru, it's Ayuru. It's like Ayuru. There's like Like your voice hits a wall right after you scream the word. So it has a snappier sound to it instead of like a long sound to it. Madobe ni tachitsukusu musuko. So her son, who was like paralyzed, like frozen at the windowsill, like standing still. No te wo, so the hand of her son, who was standing paralyzed at the windowsill. Haha ga tsuyoku hita, the mother, matuta basically, strongly pulled. So this is a case where in an English translation, I would always just pick a different verb that encompasses both strongly and pulled. Because strongly pulled sounds dumb. I would say yanked, or probably yanked is what I would choose, because to yank is to strongly pull, and it just sounds better, paints a better picture, it's shorter, it's snappier. Nigeru no yo. So this no yo ending, this is actually, I read through the translations briefly before I started recording this. I was like skimming them, and I noticed a mistake that the patrons made later. This is going to be in the next episode, so this is like a teaser, where this no yo rule comes up again, but it was misinterpreted the second time that it came up. This time it was not misinterpreted. This time it was correctly interpreted. So this no yo ending, this is, it's like a commanding form of a verb, but a motheringly command, if that makes any sense at all. So nigeru no yo, it's like, you're going to run away, or we're going to run away, okay? It has that vibe to it. It's not please run away or run away as a command, as an imperative, but like, we have to run away, or we're going to run away, okay? Understand? It's kind of like that. Like, you're going to do this. I'm your mother, and I'm telling you, you're going to do this. It's for your own good. I, as your mother, know that's kind of what this no yo ending means. So that's what nigeru no yo means, like, we have to run away. You're going to run away. Run away. It's like that. And this is Matuta saying it to Ayuru. So patron A, Ayuru, Matuta cried. She pulled him away from the sight of the carnage. We're running away now. Yeah, so that's interesting that this whole, like, he was frozen at the windowsill. Why was he frozen at the windowsill? Because there's carnage outside. So it wasn't that much of a leap to say she pulled him away from the sight of the carnage. Like, it might have been a little too free, a little bit too liberal of a change. Like, I can see where it came from. We're running away now. I like that wording for nigeru no yo. It's like, we're running away. It's not technically a command, but it is a command. And that's how it was in the Japanese. Patron B. Ayuru, his mother, grabbed his hand and pulled him into motion. We need to go. I like we need to go as well. That works too. For nigeru no yo, he grabbed his hand and pulled him into motion. Patron B also chose to just took away madobe ni tachitsukusu. And you know, it works because, like, in the previous sentence, the author was talking about how he was stunned at what he saw outside the window. So it's a little repetitive to mention again that he was stunned. Let's see what small Sarah did. Ayuru, Matuta strongly pulled at Ayuru's hands, which were paralyzed on the windowsill. His hands were paralyzed. That's very odd wording. We're going to run away. We're going to run away, okay. Like, we've got to run away would be a little better, a little stronger. Strongly pulled at Ayuru's hands. See how dumb that sounds? Just don't do that. Which were paralyzed on the windows. That's really weird wording too. Yeah, it's a great example of a translation that is technically correct, but it sounds weird. All right, next line. Ichizoku no shuryaku? It means settlement, but how the heck do you pronounce it? Shuraku, okay. I've mentioned this before, but there are so many words in Japanese. Like, I can totally read the kanji and understand what it means, but I don't know how it's pronounced. Okay. Ichizoku no shuraku kara ichiban hanareta futari no mazushi? That means poor. Yeah, mazushi. Mazushi ie ni, or uchi ni, heishi tachi wa mada kizuite inai you da. So, looking at the sentence backwards, the soldiers have not, it seems that the soldiers have not noticed yet the impoverished house that the two of them, Ayuru and his mom, lived in at the farthest outskirts of the settlement. That's what that whole jumble of a sentence means. Patron A. The soldiers didn't seem to notice their destitute home, destitute's a good word for Mazushi, which was the furthest away from the Hien settlement. Hadn't seemed, I think, might have made more sense than didn't seem. Yeah, which is why they weren't there yet. Yeah, the soldiers didn't seem to notice their destitute home, which was the furthest away from the Hien settlement. Yeah, I think hadn't noticed or hadn't seemed to notice would make more sense grammatically. Patron B. It seemed the soldiers hadn't yet noticed their meager dwelling. Ooh, meager's good too for Mazushi. Distant as it was from the center of the clan settlement. This is lovely. Like, yeah, the way everything was worded, it seemed the soldiers hadn't yet noticed. I like the yet in there, because it's like, they hadn't noticed it yet, but they will, like, pretty soon if they don't run away. Their meager dwelling, distant as it was from the center of the clan's settlement. Like, there's a temptation to say, it seemed the soldiers hadn't yet noticed their meager dwelling because it was distant from the center of the clan's settlement. That's kind of the heart of what the sentences are saying, but because sounds bad, and like it's too explainy, but distant as it was from the center of the clan's settlement is a lot nicer sounding, and it still gets the same point across. Small Sarah, it seemed like, like is weird, that would be better. It seemed like the soldiers still hadn't noticed their shabby house. Shabby's good too. Shabby house, since it was the farthest away from the settlement. Yeah, see, the since or because. Since is definitely better than because. Since works, but distant as it was is a lot better than since it was the furthest away from the settlement. Next, we have some dialogue. Taria o tasukenakucha. Matuta wa mugon de ayuru no kotoba ni kubi o futta. Sa hayaku. So, Taria wo tasukenakucha. I have to rescue Taria. This is Ayuru speaking, obviously. Matuta wa mugon de, so if you look at the kanji, it means no words. So, without a word or silently, Matuta shook her head at Ayuru's words, is literally what that's saying in Japanese. So, you know, she said nothing in reply and shook her head. Sai hayaku. Come on, we have to hurry. Or, like, hurry, or let's go. Something like that. So Patron A, I gotta save Talia. Matuta silently shook her head at his request. Please, we need to hurry. Yeah, that works. I like I gotta save Talia. It makes it definitely clear that this is Ayuru talking instead of his mom. Silently shook her head at his request. You don't even necessarily need at his request. It was in the Japanese, but you don't necessarily need it. Patron B, but Talia, I've got to save Talia. And interesting how Patron B added exclamation points in there. And in the Japanese, it was more, he's jaw-dropped, he's bewildered, he's shocked. You can kind of imagine him quietly muttering, but Talia, I gotta save Talia. I think that's kind of more what the author was going for, instead of, but Talia, I've got to save Talia. I think it's not so much that, but it's more the, I'm muttering and I'm shocked. Matuta mutely shook her head. I kind of like mutely. Sounds weird to say it out loud, though. Mutely. It sounds like mutiny. We have to go now. I like we have to go now, instead of like hurry, or we have to hurry. Like we have to go now. The now implies the hurry now. Small Sarah, Taria, we've got to save Taria. Lots of exclamation points. Again, I think I pointed this out before. I think the ellipses was weird on my Japanese keyboard when I was typing this up in Japan, so I think I just did exclamation points. But yeah, no, it shouldn't be that. It's not that vibe. Matuta silently shook her head at Ayuru's words. Beautiful literal translation. See how bad it sounds? Yeah. At Ayuru's request, like Patron A did, it makes a lot more sense and just sounds better than Ayuru's words. Or plea or something like that would work better. Never mind, just hurry. I kind of like never mind, just hurry. Although then again, like, in the original Japanese, the ellipses there for the sa hayaku, I think it implies his mom is not being frantic about this, but she's being quiet and firm. Like, she knows that this could mean the difference between life and death for both of them. And like, she knows that if she becomes hysterical, that he will become hysterical, and like they might not be able to run away at all or save themselves at all. I think she's like being cold, calm, and quiet here. So exclamation points I'm not actually sure are correct here for both patron B and small Sarah. Next line. 家から一歩足を踏み出したとき、あゆるは自分の家 or 家に向かってくる小さな人影を見た。So, toki, the moment when he took one step out of his house, or just when he took one step out of his house, あゆるは自分の家に向かってくる. So, coming towards his house. 小さな人影を見た. He saw a small silhouette of somebody running towards his house. Like the moment he stepped foot outside of it. Patron A, the moment they stepped outside, Ayuru saw a small figure making a break for their house. Making a break. That actually kind of works. Like, you know, trying to escape. And yeah, 小さな人影, that implies it's not a soldier. That implies it's a child. So making a break works as well. Like, if you leave it as the neutral, like, headed towards or running, you could for a moment be like, oh no, is it another soldier? Like, a small soldier who's coming to kill them? But yeah, it works. Patron B, the minute he set foot outside, Ayuru noticed a small figure sprinting his way. A small figure sprinting his way. I like that. And both of these patrons decided to translate hitokage as figure. It works. Silhouette can be weird sometimes. When small Sarah, when Ayuru took his first step outside, he saw something from far off approaching the house. From far off is weird, like something in the distance approaching the house. I don't know. The house, their house, maybe it would be clearer here. His house. The next line, we got some dialogue. Well, very short. Taria! Exclamation point. Matuta ga ookiku hitomi o mihiraita. So Taria, and there's no dialogue text. We don't technically know who's saying this, but I'm pretty dang sure it's Ayuru. Matuta ga, but it could be Matuta, because it's following by, like, you know, her, something happening to Matuta. So who knows who said that? I still think it's Ayuru. Matuta ga ookiku hitomi o mihiraita. So she opened her eyes wide, is what that means. Now, this me wo or hitomi o ookiku mihiraku, that phrase is just in every single narration of every single book ever, and it's really cliche, and I hate it. Like, usually I'll say opened their eyes wide, or her eyes shot open, or I'll try to find different ways of expressing it just to break up the monotony, because again, it's freaking everywhere. It's so annoying. Anyway, yeah, like her eyes bulged out, opened wide in shock, or you know, bolted open, jolted open, something like that. Patron A, it's Talia, he cried. So Patron A committed and, like, added a tag. Like, Ayuru is saying this. I think that's fine. I think it's also fine to leave it out, honestly. Like, I think it doesn't really matter who says it, and the ambiguity is fine, but it's also fine to add a quick tag. Matuta's eyes widened in fear. I like the fear. It can always help, I think, to break up the monotony, to add like an adjective to the okiku mega hiraku phrase. If you say, like, they opened wide in shock, opened wide in fear, opened wide in terror, opened wide in surprise, like that just adds a little more than just opened wide. Patron B, Talia, Matuta's eyes blew wide, and then they had a little note. Eyes blew wide is kind of a pet peeve of mine, but it seems more or less appropriate here, so I'm curious what you think. I have never seen the phrase eyes blew wide before, ever, until now. So, yeah, like, I don't know. It does sound weird to me, though. Blew wide? Sounds weird. Like, it's definitely not how I would have translated it, again, because I didn't even know about the phrase eyes blew wide until just now. But I mean, in a way, I like it just because it's, you know, new to me. Yeah, opened wide to me makes a little more sense, or jolted open. Or again, adding the adjective, like widened in fear, or widened in astonishment, or widened in surprise, or whatever. Small Sarah, Taria with no quotes. That's interesting. It's probably just like a typo, like a mistake. I guess this is more like his thoughts, you know, thinking Taria. Matuta opened her eyes wide in shock. Yeah, see, Patron A and Small Sarah took the same approach here. We're like, well, she opened her eyes wide, but we're gonna add, like, an adjective, like, why she's opening her eyes wide. Just, open her eyes wide is, like, fine. There's nothing wrong with translating it as opened her eyes wide. It's just, again, since it's such a cliche phrase in Japanese, like, if you always translate it that way, it's gonna get really redundant really quick in English. So, yeah, I think blue wide does sound weird to me, for sure. I don't know that I, like, hate it or anything, but it just sounds weird to me. Anyway, on that lovely note, we're gonna stop this episode of Let's Translate Light Novels. We'll be back in a week or two for episode 24. Thank you to all the patrons for participating in this series and for contributing financially to this series. I'd like to especially thank, as always, Greg Lay, Henry Roaming, and Data Fox for, like, personally funding my entire channel. Anyway, I'll see you next episode. Bye!